So this panel we're going to talk about monetization. The challenge of balancing, privacy protected experiences with business needs. And free experiences are key to a level playing field for kids online. But at the same time, companies need to be able to fund their services. And often the balance between the two things fails, as we've seen. So we're going to look at the general state of ad tech and children, what's possible, what we can do, and two very sort of different but very successful approaches. You've arrived. It's my magic. So we have Leigh, I'm right, and I'm very bad at pronunciation. Leigh is president of the NAI. We have Celeste Rollason, she's our senior privacy child expert at PRIVO. We have Jason Williams, who's CEO of Kiddos, which is a compliant ad tech solution. And we have Pelullo, who is senior advisor of Rego payments architecture. And Rego have developed a parent permission compliant wallet, kids wallet. So welcome and thank you for coming out till the end.
Tell us a little bit about the NAI. I'm sure everybody here knows the NAI, but it might be useful for you to give us a summary of what you're all about.
Yeah, great. Well, oh goodness, sorry. Thanks everybody for sticking around to the end. We promise to be interesting, and we promise to get done in time for you to have cocktails. So my name is Leigh Freund. I run the NAI, which is a trade association and self-regulatory organization here in the States for digital ad tech companies, and we represent them before Congress, before states, and also with our counterparts on matters of consumer privacy. So this is kind of our sweet spot. So the NAI has been around for the past 25 years, and we've largely focused on consumer privacy. We have COPPA, so we've been a little bit silent on kids and privacy, but that is changing because our legislative environment is changing, and I hope we'll talk a lot more about that. In 2023, the NAI, we've always been produced a code of conduct for companies to follow, and then we assess companies that are our members as to how well they're following that code of conduct, and that code of conduct has strong privacy protections for the use and collection of data for advertising. In 2023, we kind of took a different approach, as we have 11 state laws plus probably a dozen in 2024, a code of conduct that isn't exactly the same as all of those different state laws. It's causing challenges for companies. We need to help companies get within the guardrails of providing state-compliant privacy solutions. And so we're focused on kind of engaging with regulators and producing thoughtful and pragmatic guidance and best practices for companies to follow in this space. And one of the things that we were working on pretty hard in the beginning of the year is comments to the NPRM for COPPA, which we'll talk about.
So do talk about it, Leigh, because it's really helpful to understand your approach to the NPRM. I'm sure you're thinking already about protections for teens, because we see that coming in terms of ads. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll just kind of lay the federal and state landscape, if you will. Things, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with kind of things that are public policy related in DC. Things are a little bit of a mess in DC. It's a little bit of a dumpster fire in DC. And so, the president in the last couple of State of Union addresses has said, hey, let's focus on kids' privacy. That seems easy. Nobody wants to harm children. Everybody is 100% in agreement in Washington that we should protect kids online. We've heard a lot about all the different things, the ways that we are protecting kids online. The challenge is in the details. And so, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to, as Claire mentioned in the beginning, we want to be able to provide great content for kids and for grown-ups online, and we want to be able to have that be a monetizable thing. So while not serving ads to kids and not targeting kids seems easy, it's really a challenge. And even though we are all aligned on the principle. So I kind of feel like after, here's just the lay of the land, states. and we've heard a lot about state legislatures, right? States are becoming more active. While I was here this morning, I got a note from our public policy VP that says, you can add Virginia to the list because Virginia is talking about, about doing requiring data protection assessments for kids. It's adding to the list. I think the biggest changes we've seen are adding to the consent requirements, right? So no longer our code said that you needed to follow CIPP and you shouldn't do any targeting to kids under 13. That's now 16 as of 2020, and now it's probably going to be 18. And I think the general trend of the states is that targeted or personalized advertising to kids is going to be really frowned upon. I think that's okay because most of our companies don't want to do it and don't do it, as long as we know they're kids. So that's where the challenge comes. We've seen a couple of proposed state bills where prohibitions are outright, don't serve targeted ads to kids, but prohibitions and bans. And then on the consent standard, we've also seen the knowledge standard take a bit of a change. So, it used to be that that you had to know they were a child in order to protect, to remove them from your data set. Now, there was some kind of conversation around a constructive knowledge standard. So if you might know that kids are going to be part of the audience, you should do that. Fortunately, that didn't get adopted in the NPRM, but we're all trying to find the right balance. So I think we've landed on actual knowledge plus a willful disregard for whether or not kids are online. Obviously, we talked a lot about the Children's Age-Appropriate Design Code. The UK bill seems to be the model for states, we're looking at that. And we've heard from Carl about net choices, suits, and all of that. But this is only going to get more active. So as I think our 2024 predictor was 12 to 14 new state laws, and almost all of them will have children's privacy as part of it. So for federal legislation, as I said, it's kind of dumpster fire in Washington. We've had a couple of proposed bills kind of dancing around Congress for a couple of years. The challenge in getting those passed is the lack of bipartisanship, frankly, in Congress. And so we have, COSA, and it's similar to the Age-Appropriate Design Code, the Kids Online Safety Act, but there's some significant political opposition due to that because of the enforcement requirements. So the last version of COSA we had seen has state enforcement authority given to the AGs, and folks are really worried, and one of the things we'll talk about later, Claire, I think, is the unintended consequences of some of these regulations and some of the legislation is red and blue states are going to enforce those laws differently. So we're worried about red states enforcing in ways that can prohibit kids that are LGBT and need access to information. We're worried about those unintended consequences as well. And then finally, the COPPA NPRM. So we're working on comments now. I think it seems, and I think I spoke to one gentleman in the audience who said, gosh, for a country that doesn't have a comprehensive federal privacy law, you guys are sure doing a lot of privacy law. And the FTC is regulating and legislating in Congress's absence. And they've been very active, as I mentioned. President Biden has mentioned this multiple times. It's a priority of his, and so it's a priority of the FTC. And so we've seen, all of these things. I think, for us, the knowledge standard, the exceptions to the internal operations exception changes that are being proposed in the NPRM, and I'm going to go into those, are challenging. And then the concept of whether or not you as a company actually have to be the one directly collecting the data from kids in order to be subject to COPPA. That is a good one because our companies receive data from all kinds of places, and it's in a millisecond, when people have to make bidding decisions, I think it's a really difficult thing. There's lots of data in the bid stream, but understanding that data and being able to make accurate and compliant decisions as a result of it is hard. So I'll stop there for now. But
don't stop, because I think talking about the operational side of it for ad tech is important. Because we see all the changes, we see what's happening and what's proposed. But what does it actually mean when you're an ad tech company and you've got to make those kind of operational changes to your tech, to the back end?
Yeah, I think it's a true challenge. And as I said, I think we all start with the premise that we don't want to target ads to kids. We don't want to target ads to kids. The challenge is 15 and 16-year-olds look a lot like adults online, and they act a lot like adults online. And company or organizations that have content online that's appealing to that kind of middle teenage age group are things like ESPN. ESPN serves targeted ads on their site, and they should. And so, the policies are evolving. The compliance practices are not evolving as much. And so what we as companies worry about is that the compliance challenges of implementing this, so I mentioned the internal operations exception, if the number of sites that are child-directed expands, or the obligations of companies to understand whether or not the data that you receive as part of your advertising operations was from a site that was kid-directed. The challenges are going to be, and someone earlier talked about their engineers and how they work with their engineers. And we have to work with engineers, but getting them to kind of shift midstream in developing products is going to be kind of like shifting the Titanic away from the iceberg. It's, they are developing things quickly, but the challenge in receiving all of the data and parsing it so that we know what to do with it is going to be a challenge. So I think we see a lot of age verification companies kind of showing great promise in that regard. The challenge again is downstream data recipients and whether or not they see that. So does your SSP or does your DSP see the information about whether or not you have consent, whether or not you have parental consent, whether or not you have consent for advertising, which seems to be something that's coming out now, is separate, this is in the NPRM, separate consent for advertising uses. So, I've been to Europe, and I know I've been to California, and I know the number of times I have to click away. Every time I looked at the agenda today on my phone, I had to click away. Yes, I accept the cookies. To be additive in an area where we already have incredible fatigue, and when regulators are dismissive of the disclosures that we put out there, because already we can't understand them and effectively consent, that's not the answer. So operationally, we do have a lot of challenges. Again, I think it's important to know that the underlying premises of all these laws are good. We just don't want, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That makes sense, Leigh. And I think thinking about audience, thinking about the concept of likely to be accessed by, what strategies are, you putting together at the NAI with regard to children, but also, U18, not 12 or under, 12 or under, U13, and looking at dark patterns, algorithms, and things. What work are you doing in that area?
Yeah. So we're doing a lot of things. One thing that we've seen in the legislation that I think is really important is kind of the concept of doing DPIAs that are specifically geared towards how you're using, collecting, processing, or even have access to kids' data. And so we think that's a really valuable tool. And so we're trying to help companies figure out what is that? Is there a standard kids-directed DPIA or DPA that we can use. The other thing that we've done is, we do a lot of work with our companies on avoiding dark patterns. So we have lots of guidance and best practices out in the marketplace that says, this is how you do it with screenshots and information. And so I think, someone mentioned earlier, dark patterns, kids are very susceptible to that. And so we want to make sure that the companies are acting holistically to avoid those when possible. We also have, the problems or the challenges with reaching the right demographics and understanding, how, which sites are child directed, how to put advertising products together, and I think this is where your company comes in, that are appropriate and that we can kind of stay true to our challenge or to our pledge. As far as we know from our most recent assessments, no companies are knowingly targeting, have targeted ad products or segments or interests that are geared towards kids specifically.
Thank you. What I think is important is, we often hear that the rules are a blocker. You can't do what you want to do with sites and services. And so we do an awful lot of work about, what can you do, how can you do it, and how can you do it compliantly. So Celeste, talk to us a little bit about what's possible.
All right, I'll use this. You didn't think you'd get through a whole day at PRIVO Summit without hearing from the compliance team. So we do want to make sure that when we work with companies like Kiddos or Rego, or we have talks with the NIA, that we are building working to build frameworks, we're working to build the word of the day, the guardrails, and that it supports versus burdens our members and people working in the kids space. And to keep making good experiences, good design, and to be able to monetize, because this is a huge market. We lose so much if there aren't valuable children's experiences out there that carry and are creating these experiences. So one of the things that I've been going through today and listening to all of these panels, and I've been crossing things off my notes because we've touched on so much and there's been so many great speakers today, and I think watching the Michael at Smarty Pants talk about in those videos of the kids talking about that, what is personal information and what do you do? Don't share your personal information online. And those kids really have that savvy, but it just made me think, when we came to our panel, they're thinking about what they're actively sharing, and that discussion about passive collection and sharing is really, really where that conversation needs to be, because that's the next step. And it's really easy to say, don't collect things from kids, but that's the function of the internet, is to collect things from kids, identifiers, and how that works. And they were meant to do great things. Identifiers are always meant to do great things. Cookies were meant to speed up your work and get you loading faster, get you the right language from your location. And it's kind of gone by the wayside, and we found a way to make money off those identifiers. And again, so throughout the day, we've talked about so many different ways that those identifiers can be a benefit, whether it's through PRIVO Protect, whether it's through fraud prevention, or whether it's to give meaningful experiences to kids and appropriate ads. Is that a kid knocking at your door, as we said earlier, and how we can use that for that and give the right monetization in those situations. So it's a cliche, kids are the future, but if we build privacy in now, and we treat it as a framework rather than a challenge, rather than a burden to building experiences, then that grows your brand, and that'll continue throughout.
Yeah, you said something that just made me want to level set. There is I had a conversation with a senator who will not be named because I don't want to embarrass her, but she said, well, why do you need to collect any of this information anyway? You don't need to collect IP address. You don't need to collect, any of the session cookies. You don't need to collect any of that. You don't need to do it for advertising. You don't need to do it for anything. And so we had to take 5 steps back and say, but that's how the internet works. If you don't have some of those key pieces of information, You know, and I harken back to Jessica Rich when she was the head of the Bureau of Identity Protection at the FTC, and I sat down for a fireside chat at an NAI summit, and she said, I think IP addresses, this is way back before, when this was still an issue, I think IP addresses are personal information. And I said, well, if IP addresses are personal information, and if there's a data breach at one of our companies and all we have is a list of IP addresses, who do we notify in accordance with the data breach notification rules? And she was utterly stumped. She's like, I have no idea. I said, well, then how can it be personal information? So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. It's like some, we have to be educating lawmakers and policymakers so that they understand, I know I've said this a couple times, but the baby in the bathwater, that we can't break the internet in order to provide these protections because the internet is essential, especially with kids.
And there is an awful lot, we know that we have members in our program who can do attribution, who can do analytics, who can do advertising in compliant ways. So, these things are still possible, and they are definitely possible with kiddos and Jason's platform. So tell us some more about it, Jason.
Sure, will do. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm the CEO of Kiddos, and I'm really pleased to be here today, so thanks very much. I've got a few slides. Before I start, so many interesting points have come up today, and certainly one of them was Carl's chat from NetChoice. And so I was, there wasn't a lot of time for questions, and so I don't know who saw me, but I ran after him because he was heading out. And I was curious his opinion on, because he mentioned the fact that Facebook stands behind identity by forcing people to use their names, which is true and is a good thing. And so then I asked him, okay, well, also though Facebook, maybe it's not that we want to block usage entirely of social networks, but perhaps we should, limit the data profiling of social networks, because also in Facebook's terms and conditions is, if you join, Facebook is going to take your data and they're going to profile you for the rest of your life. And he was like, well, maybe targeted advertising to children isn't such a bad thing. And I was like, okay. And so he had to go. And then I was thinking about it after, and off he went. And his position has support in some ways, I'm sure. And I was thinking about it, and the key really, though, is that what is terrible about targeted advertising to children? And I think, in my opinion, and I'm sure we could come up with lots of good reasons, is that as a child, you should be able to explore freely, and there shouldn't be a database about you that is profiling and defining you, certainly by anyone, but especially a tech company who is going to monetize it for the rest of your life. You should be free to explore and search and do whatever you want, and then find there's a point in your life where your data is for sale, and you're going to trade that for the services that are on offer. But that point, in my opinion, probably should be 18, because, unlike we set these rules in society, like with alcohol, at a level, and even with alcohol, you get to make that decision again the next day. You're like, oh God, I'm never drinking again. But with data, as soon as you've agreed, it's over. For the rest, that's it. And so I think what we're doing to try and connect these dots between commerce, technology, regulation, life, society is super important. And can we get there? I certainly hope so. We're working from every angle. And my side is from the ad tech and the commerce angle. And so Kiddos is ad tech, and we're a software solution. And I don't have a button. We've been around about 10 years. We're about 50 people. And we're a global company. We're actually fully remote now. So we've got people in 11 countries and 14 time zones, which is kind of fun. So we get to see people from all over the world every day. We work with a ton of great brands, which is nice for us. We're focused on in-app space, so mobile media, which is where we're the leaders in that area. And all these great companies, it's a pleasure to work with them, but I'm also proud of their position in that they spend the time and the money to make sure, to the best of their efforts, that they are buying compliant, kid-safe media when they're buying media. And actually, a lot of this presentation, here's us. We reach a lot of kids. We work with tons of great companies who install our technology in their apps, and that allows us to reach this massive number of children all around the world. But I built this this deck because really there's a lack of understanding, and I was finding out when I would go into the meetings with agency or with brand on how it actually works and where the actual risks come out. And so then I had to take a step back because they weren't really asking the right questions, or they didn't know how to assess A from B. And so I said, okay, we've got to really make this simpler and show where the risks are and why if you choose B, you're going to break COPA. And there's tons of COPA being broken at all times. And because it's this knowing, they're not knowingly sharing the data of children, but the rules are so loose that children are everywhere. And so, yes, we're going to try and solve the problem from the digital identity side, which is critical, but it's hard, as all those people that are trying to do that know. And so, what's the best solution? The problem comes in because apps tell ad tech what the user is. They say it's either an adult or a child, and then ad tech says, okay, give me an ad, here's the data. And so this is the basic flow. But this one's not so important. This is, in ad tech, there are different layers of how close you can get to the media. So you can hop through many different points to get to the media. This isn't super important. Yeah. Oh, wrong way. I'm gonna learn this one day. Forward. So now, so here is a chart that shows a lot of the risk. So in the green area, you can't see it. There are different ways. So an app will get published, and the app publisher can decide, okay, I'm going to say that my app is always going to say these people are children, and then it's safe because it always tells the ad tech this is a child, therefore it's safe. Then there's apps that have decided, okay, I can have an age gate. And so on the way in, I've now created 2 segments of users. And the segment that have said they're children, okay, those are safe too, because the ad tech will be told these are children. But then there's, and fairly safe on the other side too, because these people have declared they're not children. The problem is that Google and Apple, they don't force apps to use these age gates, and age gates increase the friction of an onboarding of an app user by a percentage that is so high that it actually, publishing an app is incredibly difficult and high risk. It takes huge investment, and 98% of them fail. And so taking away 5% of your chance to succeed is a big ask. And so thousands upon thousands of apps don't, and this is the goal. Okay, I'm going to get to the right slide. So thousands and thousands of apps, they publish, and instead of putting an age gate, instead of saying it's for kids, they say in my terms and conditions, if you download this app, you've agreed that you're not a child. But the problem is that kids are everywhere, and kids are actually, 22% of the population, and they're probably downloading more than 22% of the apps because they have the most time available of any segment of the population. And so probably 30 or more % of the downloads in the store are children. And way less than that of the bid requests that are coming out of the apps themselves are saying these are children. And so the flow that happens is here. So app tells ad tech, this is not a child, but the app doesn't know, and the app forced the user to agree that they weren't a child. And so this is the flow that creates the huge problem. And so in theory, this could be solved by this app taking Kiddo software and saying, okay, Kiddo software is going to change our software changes the data from, we basically, no matter what the app tells us, we say, oh, it's a child. So we ignore what the app tells us. We just change all the data to be COPA compliant, and out it goes. But the app won't take our software because then they'd be admitting that they have children, and so they can't take our software. And so the solution is to go one step down in this flow, create one more hop. So now we buy into these apps with a safer technology. So here's the broken flow. The app says it's an adult, even though it's a child. The data is shared. The buying occurs with the data, and the profiling happens because all of these DSPs are built to profile and harvest data. And the solution is here. Changes. Yeah. So now it's the same flow, but our technology, one step away, it receives the bad data, but we just throw it in the garbage. We say, no, we don't care what you told us, app or ad tech. We don't care that you tell me that this is an adult because we don't believe you. We're going to treat it like it's a child, and we take the data and then we buy that COPPA compliantly and totally contextually. And so this is a solution that we're giving to agency and brand to say, this is the way that if you have child-directed media, you can be totally safe, you can be brand safe, and you can advertise your products, and these people can monetize their content. And so that's the PRIVO solution.
Thank you. I think there really is a lack of understanding in industry about what is a compliant solution, and we see that a lot. And we see publishers being told that oh, we've got a compliant solution. You just flag as your kids are 12 or under, and follow that. But then it's what they're doing with the data afterwards. And so they may be compliant, but your use of them may not be compliant. It's a really complex space, and I think the more solutions like Jason's and others are really helping children's experiences so that kids can have these experiences and apps and can survive and meet their business objectives and needs as well. Luke is doing something very different in the children's space with their wallet. But it's another great solution for kids. And we know that more and more kids are being faced with making payments online. But kids can't sign up to a terms of agreement. That they can't agree to a contract. So having a parent permissioned wallet that's compliant goes a long way to solving a lot of the issues with that. So Luke, tell us about the Missoula app.
Fantastic. Let me pop our slides up here. So my name is Luke Pelullo. I was part of the original team that started Rego. It used to be called Virtual Piggy and then Oink, so some of you might know us by that moniker. But in 2008, when the company was founded, we actually originally started out as a gaming development engine, and we had this small piece that was focused on commerce and focused on youth commerce. And as we started talking to gaming publishers, there was a lot of interest, more so in just the commerce piece. How do I use that to help monetize a younger audience? And we took a step back and said, wow, there's a real business to be had here. And we continued forward with just the monetization piece. So really what we built is, and it's evolved to really be the first family-focused neobank at this point. Back then, it was really just an online way for parents to set up an account for their kids, set up parental controls, set up permissions, and essentially what our IP does is it creates a sub-account that permissions the child or sub-account user to be able to transact on the parent's behalf using the parent's information. So creating this from privacy ground up, we said we don't want to collect any of the personally identifiable information of the child. We just want to use the parent's information to transact, and we want the kid to be able to transact using that parental information. So that's really how we architected this with privacy at the center of it, and we ultimately evolved this to be the first kids card program in a JV with Discover to really address the offline needs as well as the online needs of a youth shopper. So really where we've gone from here, we have become the first mobile wallet that is COPPA compliant and GDPR Kids compliant. So thank you to PRIVO and Denise and Claire for really helping us pioneer that. And they've been a valuable partner for us for man, the past 9 years now, something like that. It's been a great partnership. So we have a suite of products really, and I don't need to tell you guys, we've heard this time and time again, huge market, huge purchasing power, hard to monetize, hard to stay compliant, and hard to market too. So the suite of products that we've built really kind of cater to both the family, to the parents, and to the kids. And how do we build a product that solves all of those needs, right? Merchants want to monetize kids, they want to do it easily, they want to do it cheaply, and they want to stay in compliance. Parents want a wallet that their kids are protected, that they have visibility, that they have transparency, and can really understand what their kids are buying, why they're buying it, and be part of that conversation and really help the kids develop skills around financial literacy, around money management, about making purchase decisions, maybe having a healthy dose of buyer's remorse when that's necessary, which we've all had. And kids want to use something that's cool. They want to use something that's easy. They want to feel like they have some dough in their pocket and they have the purchasing power and the independence to make those purchasing decisions. So how do we come up with a product that satisfies all of those needs? And how do we continue to evolve that alongside of the increasing regulation? So our first product really is centered around the family. And so we've created the Missoula wallet. And essentially what this is a direct-to-consumer mobile wallet and kind of bank account that goes alongside of that parents set up for their kids. So essentially when setting it up, again, we don't collect any information on the kid. We collect some information that's not PII, that we can help kind of tailor the experience around the child. But really what they're doing is creating a contract between the parent and the kid to be able to permission them to use this virtual wallet, to be able to use the bank account that's associated with that wallet. And then there's a whole set of permissions, activities that they can do around money management, peer-to-peer functionality, chores that they can set up. So really holistically looking at the parent-child relationship, which is a complicated one in terms of financials, and how to create an enjoyable experience for both, where both feel empowered, both are enjoying the experience, and it's delivering on the functionality that we needed to. As we evolved this, there was a growing need for other banks and FIs to want to be able to offer their own kid-friendly product. And so how do we ultimately target families, target younger users, and do it in a way that protects privacy and ultimately can introduce those banks' products to a kid as they age out and maybe move into a more graduated product. So we also have an entirely white labeled product that we use with FIs and banks to do the same thing that we're doing for our customers direct to consumer, but just under that bank's name and using all of their different products. As we continue to look at, okay, how do we continue to serve the merchant more? We developed a direct-to-merchant solution where they can integrate in a number of ways that both enables them to market to kids and then also monetize kids, all within CIPP and GDPR compliance. So the way in which a merchant, or we can use an online game, for instance, they can integrate with Missoula Pay. It flashes up our QR code. If that user is a Missoula user or if an underlying bank is using our technology, they take a picture of that QR code, they pull it up, and it puts them into our CIPP compliant payment flow. What we do on the back end is we push all of that information, which is the parent's information, to that merchant, and that transaction is able to go through. We're also able to do direct bank accounts as well, so we actually don't need to use debit rails. We can have a direct bank transfer if the merchant prefers that as well. This is pretty revolutionary. Not only does it protect them from any CIPP violations, but the merchants view this as a way for them to increase volumes, not decrease volumes, right? As we all know, there's a disincentive to put more steps in place, and for us, we're really trying to remove some of that friction. We're trying to increase volume and do it in a way that's safe for merchants as well. So this has really been a key part of our success so far. People talk about neobanks for kids, and we have the Green Lakes of the world and the Steps and the Go Henrys, and really the way that we've tried to differentiate ourselves. Not only were we the first, and my esteemed colleague Tom Kiefer here, he and I in 2011 and 2012 were really trying to push this narrative forward that there needs to be a family-first neobank, and there needs to be a banking product and a commerce product with kids at the heart of it, and privacy really overarching everything that we do. And we've ended up, being able to continue to differentiate ourselves with this focus on COPPA and GDPR compliance and privacy at the heart of everything we do. So really, it's about, first and foremost, serving the child, serving the family and the parent, creating an enjoyable experience where they're learning how to use products, payments products, they're learning financial wellness, they're becoming a responsible consumer. And then with merchants, how do we continue to develop that relationship between the child and the merchant, but do it in a way that is parental approved, is controlled by the parent, and ultimately serves the kid well. And I think we've done a pretty good job doing that so far. I'm happy to take questions or chat offline at happy hour with anybody who has any further questions on how this might apply to you or your business.
I love the fact that we see kids making lots of purchases on their parents' credit cards historically. I worked on an MMO where they spent huge amounts of their parents' money without a parent having any knowledge whatsoever, and that's not good for the business, it's not good for the parent, it's not good for the kid. So also I think it helps deal with this issue of nudging kids into making purchases because the parent has the transparency, right? So yeah.
Exactly, yeah. The concept of buyer's remorse and making purchasing decisions isn't really there for a kid if they have an unlimited bank account, right? But as soon as it's their $20 that they're making purchasing decisions with, I think it develops healthy habits around managing money and making your own decisions. And for the parent, you want to empower your kid at a young age to make those decisions, to make mistakes, but do it under the control and the visibility of the parent. So I think it creates a conversation that needs to happen in the household that otherwise doesn't necessarily happen all the time.
Absolutely. We have time for questions. I know everybody's keen to have a drink, but yeah, please, you need a mic though. Yeah. I know we know who you are, but introduce yourself. I think that would be lovely.
Sure. Hi everyone, this is Leigh. I'm from Zwift. I have a question to the last speaker. I apologize, I didn't bring the name. I was hoping if there was a slide where you had this back-end kind of flow of the companies accessing, the last one, right? Microservices accessing COPPA compliant datasets. So I assume that's the Rego-based COPPA compliance datasets. I don't know how much you can talk about it, about the back-end stuff. Can you a little more elaborate on that, especially like when it comes to us compliance folks or legal folks? The requirements are very easy when you say it in this way of you should not be retaining kids' information if you are to then anonymize it or mask it, right? But masking in itself, actually, in an engineering way, it's really a hard task. So I was wondering how your company is accomplishing this task.
Yeah, so there's a couple things, and we have IP around that as well, but really from the ground up, like I said, we're not collecting PII on the child. So when we do package that data up, when we do anonymize it, it's really centered around age, it's centered around geographic location, it's centered around frequency of purchasing, amounts, and so we've come up with some creative ways in order to package that data and use that with our merchant partners. From an architecture standpoint, it's really all through our wallet and the architecture that we've developed. So we're capturing all of that transactional data. We're not capturing it anywhere that they're going in terms of websites or browsers. But the transactional data is really what we're able to capture because, in fact, that's the transactional data of the parent, right? So it's the contract between the parent and the child and the sub-account, master account architecture. So that the child is making a purchase on behalf of the parent at the end of the day.